Sorry, it's 6:30.
Hi there, everybody. I
Hey.
see Susan's on mute. Yeah, Ashley, I just called you. It's like, oh no, it's 6:30. So I see you were getting us on while I was calling you. So
Yeah, sorry, my internet needed to reset.
yeah, you know, the worst thing when we're so dependent on technology is every now and then you have to wait for technology to do something. So there we have it. And let
Is
me
my
just
audio
get
working? Just checking. Laura, do you hear me?
Gotcha, Jeff.
Oh, go ahead.
Good, thank you. Good. I just realized my name says Hinchy for NY.
Yes,
That's
it does.
not really me, but I was using the Zoom recently, so that's why it's.
You were using that today?
I was using, yeah, I do schedule some Zoom meetings for her, yeah.
Ah, okay. So that's what Zoom knows you to be. So
Yes,
You
yep.
can change that. Well, Ed has the best background. That is super.
yeah, that is
Ed,
super.
you have to unmute yourself so we can hear what you say.
Well, maybe he'll decide to not unmute himself so
Maybe.
that
Well,
he
his
can
lips
hear
were
you.
moving, so I thought he wanted to say something.
So that's okay. So now we're waiting. So that's three of us. We've defined 4 as a quorum. I know Connor is coming,
Okay.
and we also have David Menzies, and we also have Michael Castiglione, who I left everybody voicemails as a reminder. Plus, they all would have gotten the email from Ashley.
Who's
Right.
So
Connor?
there's
Connor.
Connor now. So we have a quorum with Connor,
Okay,
and
great.
now Kirk is joining too, I believe.
Yes. Mhm.
So we'll just hang out for a minute because that's the one thing about Zoom is everybody's got to be allowed into the room. So
Right.
and there's Connor. Hi, Connor.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Hey. So we're still we're waiting for Kirk, who I think is probably the man of the hour. But anyway, I'm going to write down who's here. It's just what I do. We have Ed, we have Connor, we have Jeff, and then we have our guests. We have Susan. And thank you, Susan, for joining. And
There's Kirk.
and there's
Kirk.
Kirk. Yay. Hi, Kirk. We're getting going in just a second here. I'm writing down who's here.
Hey, Connor, I have a quick planning board question for you.
Sure thing.
Did the issue of library secret come up yet in the planning board?
No, it has not.
Okay,
I'll tell you, for a long time, it seemed like all we were doing was short-term rentals.
yeah.
We're about to get back into the full swing of regular meetings, but I think those are put on hiatus. So
Okay.
you might want to ask Nadine about that when it might come up. Nadine.
I'll do that. Thank you.
Oh, I'm
Yep.
sorry. No, Melissa Gray. I'm sorry. I was just
Okay.
talking to Nadine. She was our old secretary. Sorry. Melissa Gray.
If I email planning at Woodstock, whatever.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, she'll get that.
That should work. Okay, good. Okay.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order officially. And so even though I have some housekeeping things to cover with the zoning revision committee, like minutes and well, we'll approve the agenda first because that's what we're here to do. So why don't we'll worry about minutes and other stuff later. But I did send the agenda out a little while ago, and I didn't know if anybody would like to make a motion to approve agenda.
Oh, so moved.
So moved. Anybody second?
I'll second it.
Yay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Yay. So it passed. Okay. So the agenda includes now, I do like to share my screen, Ashley. So if you would please let me share my screen. and I'll share it as soon as I
You
get
should be
the,
all set.
I'm sorry, tell me again?
You should be all set to share.
Okay, so I'll share for 2 reasons. I'm just going to share my whole screen. Whoops, there we go, share. You got to click it a couple times. So you're on the agenda, just so everybody can see the agenda. We'll do the other stuff later, but anyway, subject matter expert guests. We have Kirk Ritchie and Susan Goldman to discuss the housing. And of course, I didn't know others would be there, but welcome everybody who's joining us. And then I did send that file out. And so what I will want to do is I will want to go see if I can pull it up. Oh, there we go. So I am sharing the screen with what you sent. So I don't know whether, Kirk, I'll start with you. Did you just want to talk, or did you want to, I can take this down and you can talk, or I have it up and we could use it as a starting place.
Well, does everybody have this document already in their midst, or with what was distributed? And
They were sent it
a
couple hours ago.
Keep this document up. It's okay with us. And, you know, let me just say that Susan and I felt like we would maybe be presenting for a short window of time, and then there'd be some conversation, and that would be the extent of our time together. And I don't know what you were thinking in terms of length of time. I don't see any times on your agenda, but I think we have other people lined up. So we're pretty quick here. We have a pretty short presentation here.
Yeah, other people aren't lined up today. I tend to have in the agenda, I have future plans as well as today. And so we had some other things to talk about, but our meetings tend to run an hour. So, and I thought we could spend 45 minutes on your stuff. If you choose to spend 45 minutes on your stuff, that would not be a problem. So if you want to spend less, it's up to you.
No, that would be fine. We were thinking 20 minutes, and then the rest would be conversation amongst all the members.
Sure,
So
perfect.
that's our hope.
There might be questions.
And
we'll
questions
know.
or comments and such or whatever. And then we also, just so you know, that we do have plans to submit 3 documents, and we were waiting to submit those to the committee because there might be other things that will come up in this conversation this evening. And so we'd like
Sure.
to make one submittal. So some of those documents we'll be referencing in our conversation this evening. So let me just get started. So basically, we do have a mission, as I'm sure you do too, and we'd like to learn a little bit more about that later. But that our mission is, as we were, as a result of the comprehensive plan, a housing committee was recommended, and we are that committee. And it's mostly derived out of the need to respond to the severe shortage of homes, and basically the large amount, if you want to put it in another way, of displacement that's taking place in Woodstock right now as we speak. And so, we as a Woodstock Housing Committee, we will recommend a diverse, sustainable set of options that match the welcoming values and innovative character of our community. We wrote this in the very beginning. It was the first thing we did when we began in March of 2019. And basically, again, our activities support the mission of Woodstock Comprehensive Plan and the balance of inclusiveness and community values and the environmental preservation while promoting sustainable growth. And so we're here to talk about that. I won't read much more of this document, but I just wanted to read that mission statement because those are not my words, those are the committee's words. And so also the members of the committee, you can see that Susan and I co-chair, and there's a number of members that we have, and some of you may know them. And then we have Richard Hepner as our town board liaison, and he's been very active. This is, he's been to all of our meetings and involved in a lot of our conversations. So he's been very active liaison.
Yep.
And so basically what we like to do is give an overview now of this, next, and then we'll just go through the document. Susan and I will be sharing the conversation with you at this moment.
Okay, and let me just jump in real quick. So actually, we are being recorded, correct?
Yeah, I hope so.
Just checking with that.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it says in the corner, recording.
Okay, well, that's good because my screen looks different because I'm sharing, so.
But
Okay.
it's recording, yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.
I don't want to miss a word of what you say.
Okay, great. Well, Susan?
Hopefully some will be familiar. Yes, I'm going to start with a simple sentence that Woodstock is at a crossroads. It's not a surprise, I hope, to anyone on this committee. It's a statement that we could have made 20 years ago and still have been accurate. Conversations about the change in the character of the town, the inability of people who were born here to stay here, the inability of young families to find appropriate housing, the inability of seniors to remain in their homes or in the community. All these things have been growing at least for 20 years that I've been cataloging. And with each new crisis, with each new increase in cost of housing, in the market for housing, in the attractiveness of Woodstock to other people, it bumps up the stakes in this crisis. Pattern for Progress and the United Way joined together to create a study of the area and to particularly to track the housing challenges and housing burdens, the cost of housing as a burden to people. And in Woodstock, it looked in 2017, 2018 actually, that 35 to 40% of Woodstock households were cost burdened, meaning they pay more than 1/3 of their incomes on housing costs. Some pay upwards of 50%. That's huge. And what it means is that people cannot look to remain in Woodstock if they've been living here for the long term, and young families don't move in. We've been losing that cohort in our demographic for many years, and it keeps dripping away. It's dripping away and causing consternation about the viability of our elementary school. It's dripping away and causing businesses to consider whether they can have access to high quality employees. Part of our process, we did focus groups, small invited focus groups representing longtime Woodstockers, people who rent, people who own, leader of the fire department, librarians. We had a lot of people in. We also met individually with business owners and heard universally that the challenge is making it hard for people to stay in town as a business. They can't find housing for their well-paid employees. They can't find adequate, healthy, non-moldy, affordable housing for those that they pay upwards of $50,000, and they can't find housing for their low wage or lower wage workers, their assembly line workers, the support workers. They can't find housing at that end either. So it is incumbent upon the whole town. I think the short-term rental situation made it visible for everyone. This is no longer just us and them. This is something, no matter who you talk to, people are concerned about not having adequate housing that is affordable for most full-time Woodstockers. And it is that 40% number creeps up every year and making it harder and harder. And we're seeing a bump right now because of COVID-19. As I'm sure you all know, the real estate market is hot. And what a number of years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, people were buying because they could rent out for short-term rentals. Now people are buying because they want to move out of the city and they feel like they can work distance up here and maybe put down roots of some sort. But it's at very high cost and is making it more difficult than ever for our workers, our young families and seniors to stay in town. And that affects the whole character of the town. Its longevity as an arts center, its mix of people at all economic levels. It's the welcoming nature of our town. And I think it's probably not news to everyone in this committee, but it was the driving, motivating image that we kept with us as we did all of our research and for the recommendations that we will ultimately be making.
Yeah. And, part of that what we're the efforts that we've been making, if you could scroll down a little bit more, Laura, that'd be great. We recognize that our task really is to, at this point in our understanding, it better serves our focus to focus on the people that need housing rather than the types of housing, rather than types of dwellings, if you will, initially, and we'll get into those later when we mature our thinking. But at this point, it's been clear since the comprehensive plan did its work, it's been clear that we need workforce housing. It's serious. It's very serious. It's been serious for a long time. When the fire commissioner came and visited with the comprehensive plan, the very first thing he said was housing, 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 and that it was because it's obvious, right? And so that became even more clear now with essential services such as essential retail workers with COVID-19. So all of those people, along with the police, along with others, right? Emergency response people, first responders, all of that whole body of people is something we need to really make sure we have a proper amount of inventory that really supports that whole arena of our community, right? And I'm thinking about inventory. I'm always going to use that word because that's what we need. We need inventory, okay? And not a large amount. We're not a very smart, large town. And so we need housing for artists also. And the anchor institutions of our community are ones that, that are really eager to look at this topic of focused housing just for artists, to support their residencies, to support any other thing that may be longer term as well. So there's a whole myriad of possibilities there. And then, Susan and I, we've been speaking, and the committee has been looking at the property owner options such as the ADUs. And, we wanted to be in a conversation around the density level, if you will, around the hamlet. And what does that look like? Or just the density level at all. That's a conversation I think that we would like to have with this committee and what your thinking is going forward. So that'll help us understand more. So Susan, do you have anything more to say, maybe for the balance of bullets?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that in thinking about the issue and the solutions, our idea has always been, because we've heard concern across the entire community,
Right.
that the solutions need to be varied. They need to be varied in size, they need to be varied in location, and in the target group that they're going to serve. And so it's one of the reasons that zoning is so critical, is because we're not just looking at one project, which is kind of what the Housing Committee has done in the past. It's how we've gotten a couple of things in town happening. But we feel that Woodstockers can come up with great creative solutions if we give them some flexibility in the rules, if we give them some incentives and encouragement. There's a lot of models out there for alternative housing. And part of the thrust is to provide housing for the people who are leaving and who can't move in. But the other part is things that property owners can do to help them stay and be able to afford the property they currently live in. So the things we've looked at are a combination of those things. So you'll see the home sharing and the ADUs, which are, not necessarily new building. They're helping people figure out what they might be able to do in their current living situation. Just want to point out that we're looking everywhere, hoping to create opportunities everywhere in town.
Yeah, using the existing inventory of what we already possess, if you will, as a town. There may be a tremendous amount of possibilities there just in that in itself. So back to Susan's point, is like multiple varied, not one big bang, not one big project here, right? We're talking about things happening in every hamlet. Why not, right? But then also maybe more things happening in certain hamlets because of decisions made at the zoning level with the density and such, right? So these are all connected. So one of the things that we would like to talk about this evening, a part of our task, is that we started as a committee to really look at what kind of committee did we want? What did we want to focus on when we first began? And early on, we all as a committee determined that it's best to focus on the systemic issues and try to make changes there. and seek changes there, not try, but seek changes at the systemic level. And rather than focus on a single project that Susan just alluded to, because that's not a solution we need. We don't need a single project. We don't need to like identify one big bang in our community. We need multiple solutions, as we just alluded to above on our task. So it all goes hand in hand in our thinking. And basically we're thinking about it from a standpoint of a Woodstock community housing mindset. Like we could look at our town and look at it strategically and determine what it is we need from our inventory, and then begin to plan to initiate projects that fulfill those needs. And so that's really the way I'm thinking, approaching this problem. And I think a lot of people in the committee are thinking about it too. And to help offset this displacement that's taking place in Woodstock, of course, that's what it's about. And one of the things that we are doing and will be doing is that the reason why we're having this displacement is because of the market that exists, right? The market is making this displacement take place as the market is. We're not trying to change the market. We want to change the rules that the market is playing on. Therefore, we then have an advantage that we could create. And that's where we are approaching the idea of a land trust, a community housing trust, which then operates under a different set of rules with the properties that it owns, just as land trust in our community. So that's a recommendation that we may be making, or we will be making, not may, but it is something that we feel as a public-private partnership could yield a tremendous amount of value to our community when you involve the public in a sense of contributing to helping the government fulfill the need, if you will, of the government, because people are trying to rely upon the government to take care of this community in that, in one sense, but really it's a collaboration. And we don't want, I personally don't see us just hoping that some developer is going to come along and develop privately for his, you know, because they have their own motives, right? And so we could have a motive ourselves by looking at our town's needs and planning towards those needs and fulfilling projects along with a collaboration with a trust to help us achieve those things. So that's one thing. And then basically it would be full range of rental and also, you know, for purchase homes in terms of properties. It wouldn't just be, but it would be focused specifically on the middle class and low income residents resulting from the inequitable housing that's taking place right now in our town, okay? So, and we will provide to you this document that we're alluding to called the Community Housing, Woodstock Community Housing Trust, that we have also then shared. We've also shared this document with Bill, and there's been some conversation there as well, which we can talk about later. So that's something that you will all be able to review and then assemble your own questions and comments back to us. And that's what we'll be providing to you. So there's additional information far beyond what I've just sent to it.
Okay.
So Susan?
Yeah. So with all these things in mind, we have been really diving in and doing a lot of research into what other communities have been doing about housing and zoning in neighboring towns, in neighboring states. We've looked at a lot of material, and we, you know, have links and resources for you if should you choose to look at them, that we relied on in terms of our thinking. One of the things about the trust is that it, as a nonprofit, it will be much more flexible than a town committee could be in trying to accomplish these things. And so that's one of the reasons we keep looking at that model. It's been very successful in many places, and it really is the underpinning for anything we'll be able to accomplish and maintain over a long period of time. It's the way we will ensure the longevity of projects that are taken on, whether they're something in somebody's front yard or something larger than that. So the trust idea is key to what we're doing here. Initially, reviewing the current zoning law, which we assume you're doing, but we did to some degree looking at things specifically with a housing focus. First thing we noticed was that housing isn't mentioned in the preamble. So we have drafted a suggested revision to the preamble, which we will give to you at the end.
I'm sorry, the preamble of which document?
of the zoning law, zoning code, the preamble.
Oh, okay, okay.
Which, you know, in terms of model zoning laws, needs to be aligned with the comprehensive plan goals. And so that was our focus, to incorporate not only the things that are already in the preamble, but to add the things that the comprehensive plan also recommended, in our case, housing. And we also sought to redefine, rethink what is traditionally referred to in zoning law as affordable, because of all of the stigma that comes along with affordable housing. So we're trying to be very continuous with our use of Woodstock community housing as our model. And there's a suggested definition of what makes up Woodstock community housing, which is who we're going to be seeking to provide housing for. So initially looking at the zoning code and seeing where the obstacles might be, look at some of the sections and say, well, you know, are these too restrictive in terms of being able to allow the kind of flexibility? What kind of rules do we have around manufactured houses or tiny houses or cluster housing? What about multifamily dwellings? What do we have in our current law that may be coming up in terms of people looking at developing projects as a barrier to doing something that is for the community? So that's one part of looking at zoning. And the other part is looking at creative ways that we can add to our zoning law, more inclusionary zoning, whether it's expedited processes for projects that meet the criteria of Woodstock community housing. It's all rolled up in a ball here, so that things that meet the criteria then could get incentives, whether it's expedited procedures or relaxation of certain rules that have been predetermined in the zoning code. So that we're looking at those kinds of changes, which hopefully will meet with your thinking, so that there could be a way to simplify if a developer endeavors to do something, or an individual endeavors to do something, which will be a long-term addition to the community housing inventory. And we have more detail, of course, on all things, but we just want to give you kind of an overview. So whether it's mixed use zones, the changes to the accessory dwelling part of the code that we already have, accessory apartments, cottage communities, a floating zone just for Woodstock community housing, the planned residential development, and expedited procedures. Those are just some of the things that we have researched and looked into. So that's kind of a quick overview of what we've been doing.
Kind of a fire hose of stuff, actually.
We
A
have
lot of
We've been
stuff.
working very hard. We have a very small committee, and and some of them are on at this meeting,
Yes.
which is in itself, I think, commendable. But this is truly a group effort. Everyone has done hard work, used their innate skills, their work contacts, their abilities to contribute. This is definitely a committee work product.
But well,
And I
definitely.
would also say, I want to add one more comment here about the committee, and that the whole committee viewed this meeting and this date, if you will, as a milestone for us, because then we would be delivering a body of work that we've done in our research associated with housing and specifically with zoning. Okay, so we have other things we've been working on as well, but this is all associated with zoning. So the way Susan and I see that, the way I see it, I think Susan does too, absolutely, we speak of it in this way, is this is the first of our meetings together as two committees, right? This is the beginning of a conversation of hopes that we could lead to collaboration. That's really where Susan and I are coming from, that we have the hope to collaborate with you on making our zoning for housing exciting for our town and making things possible for the vision that this town is holding it for as a possibility for itself. I don't want to get too philosophical here, but you know, I'm just saying that that's where we're coming from. Is it iterative? Let's not just disappear from each other for months and months and then come back. Let's make this iterative even. And Jeff,
Sure.
you can understand the value of iterative thinking, and I'm a big proponent of it. So any cycle that you can create with us, please do. And we will give you these documents after some documents. If you have further questions and comments and want more, we have more documentation as well. So that's where we're coming from regarding this. And now we would like to turn it around, because as a committee, we realized early on, we really didn't know your mandate. We don't know who you are as a committee, and we would like to know who you are and what your mission is, and more about you, and where that is at aligned with us, and how could we then ultimately collaborate, find place to collaborate. Even this evening, we could identify some of those places, and you could then help us. You could coach us what we could do for you to help you achieve what your mandate is. And that's
If I can answer that question, because I think I got an answer for it.
okay.
I think that our role is to look at the existing zoning laws and figure out what zoning laws need to be changed to support the goals of the comprehensive plan. Many of those zoning laws interact with housing. So where the commonality is and where the collaboration comes from is to work with you to find out what it is that you view as the housing solution that we need in Woodstock, because we all know the same problem. We all understand the problem. There's 100% agreement that there is an issue and there's something that we need to do about it. And part of that involves changing zoning laws. As we know, our zoning laws are kind of constructed to ensure a lack of density, frankly, more than encouraging density in certain areas. It's more to discourage density in certain areas. So we need to look at how those can be changed to encourage density in a way that we want to encourage a density. And I think that you guys have come up with this, as you've described, ideas and thoughts and plans on how to do that. And my belief is that we need to have members of this committee, our committee, working closely with your committee on those aspects that require zoning changes. And once we understand those, we can bring those zoning changes to the plan, to the town board with recommendations that they make those changes. I know Connor's really leading this, but so I don't want to step on Connor's toes here, but I think that he's passionate about this. I'm passionate about this too, is a thing that we need in our town. And you know, if that's the case, I think that I would suggest that a subcommittee of our committee work with a subcommittee of your committee to try to figure out those exact zoning changes and get them documented and get them to the planning board, to the town board for passing. I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, and we are actually, Jeff, because actually Connor and I are the two that are assigned to this. So let me just kind of go, let me take it from the top for a moment.
Yep.
So Kirk, there are 4 documents that I maintain on an ongoing basis. You know, one is we have minutes, one is we have the agenda. The other 2 documents are the reference document and our action item document. So the reference document does talk about who we are and why we're here. It starts out with the resolution that started us up, that we, this is the Zoning Revision Committee, and look at issues spelled out by the comprehensive plan. I'll get to that in a moment. We do have our mission objectives stated here. Again, look at issues spelled out by the comp plan. But as documented in the Zoning Committee Action List Word document, because as you recall, Kirk, and I helped do this, is once your wonderful committee, the wonderful committee that you led brought us the comprehensive plan, it had the whole section 4, which was what are our action items, and they got split into categories like, you know, housing spawned your group, and zoning revision spawned this group, and other groups, WEC got their set of stuff. So we are a committee that grew out of the comp plan, just like housing. I think housing was there before, but it got certainly resumed because of the comprehensive plan. So So we are, when we even say in our mission, we can address zoning issues not specifically noted in the comprehensive plan, because one of the items is we should have a group to look at the whole zoning law periodically anyway, and see if anything else needs to change. And so as we're going through things, we could still change something, we could still recommend a change, even if not specifically spelled out. And as Jeff says, the process, exactly what he said, is we'll come forth with recommended wording, which we get working with different groups like yours, and then we'll go forward to the town board. So our deliverables, of course, are zoning revision recommendations to the Woodstock Town Board. We may need to work to get buy-in, and we're going to plan to write the revisions we recommend. So we're not just going to say, oh, this law ought to change over there, but we're going to actually come forth to the town board with our revisions that we do recommend. And the protocol, we don't have to read all those words, but basically 4 is a quorum, so anything needs to have 4. Anything needs to have 4 votes yes for us to put it forth to the town board. And if anybody greatly disagrees, then they can write their opposing argument that could also go to the town board. But we do have a process, our protocol for how to get our zoning change recommendations there. Meeting protocol is in there, reference links, a bunch of stuff. And funny, interestingly enough, the comp plan's not there, but everybody got a copy of it. I should put that as a reference link. And then our meeting stuff. But the other document I do want to show is the action plan. And the action plan is the summary of the 13 items that we have. You can see housing is, we split it, it was huge. We split it into 7A and 7B, with Connor and me as the people who volunteered to work this. So so that's the subcommittee that Jeff was talking about. It's pretty well, but I'm not going to deny anybody. I think a lot of people are excited about housing. If anybody else on the zoning revision committee wants to be part of this, certainly, you know, open tent, come on in. So far we've said it's Connor and me, and I call it in progress because I had attended that meeting of yours, Kirk, a while back. But then if we zoom up here, the description is, I've got a tracking of the discussions that we have, and the description is exactly what did the zoning law say, I'm sorry, the comp plan, what exactly did the comp plan say, and then who's the lead within us, and some references of where we already think the zoning law touches on things. And so I would love to have, the collaboration is clearly the way to go, because, you know, we know some things about some things and you know some things about some things, and together we'll know, I think, everything about everything. And once again, item 7B is the PRD. And again, this comp plan description is lifted directly out of section 4. What did it say about housing related to zoning? And again, we have some references to some different things, zoning reference law, and who do we want to have come talk to us? And we probably want, besides you all, Complete Streets Committee. And I'm just going to go back to the 7A for a minute. Yeah, Housing Committee. So this is, as the chair of the Zoning Revision Committee, this is the organization that's kind of a framework to kind of get us going. But this meeting is wonderful because, you know, now we can get going. So this is kind of, you know, in the 2 documents, really, the reference document that talks about who we are and how we got here, and then this action item document, it does lay out, you know, some tracks of where we've been. And and getting back to Grace, who says, put your minutes on 1 page. That's why I built this action plan document, because there's so much going on I didn't want to lose. But the minutes can be on 1 page or maybe 2 at most. But the so I am building this, you know, document. But next steps, I'm looking forward to talking about next steps. And I jumped in, you know, Jeff jumped in, Connor's helping co-lead. And so Connor, why don't you take a moment to say whatever you want to say on the topic.
Thank you. Well, for one thing, thank you for coming. Thank you for presenting. One thing I want to throw out there is that obviously COVID has changed a lot about the way that I think about this. Obviously, as you've gathered from Laura and excuse me, and I'm drawing a blank. I'm sorry. I just got off work. I'm super fried.
Me and
But
Jeff.
the
I'm talking to Jeff.
yes, I'm talking to Jeff. But the
Because that's
I
she's
almost
from New York. That's why he's
I
confused.
almost yeah
This is Connor.
I almost
Connor, this is
yeah
Jeff.
I almost called you Colin, and Colin is what everyone calls me. But the thing is you know, our purview is mostly about language. To echo Ed
Sure.
Sanders, who has not spoken tonight, it's mostly about language and coming up with the right language and making it targeted, specific, and as clear as possible. One thing, I mean, I just want to throw out into the mix are some of my new concerns regarding the dramatic changes that have happened over the last couple of months. One, I was expecting to have a couple of people in the audience, you know, who wanted to talk about telecom, but we're not talking about telecom. The only line I'm going to draw to that right now is that the infrastructure that will allow people to maintain a living situation in this town and to work in this town may rely on their ability to perform remote work. And in excuse me, and encouraging, and I guess without rambling too much about it, I would just put it out there that whatever we wherever we decide to develop, however we decide to develop, I think it's going to be very important that we have a robust, high speed, and accessible network infrastructure that, you know, will encourage people to come up here and continue working, because that, I can tell you, will be a very attractive feature going into the future. It's like you guys said, you know, I've seen it more than anyone else. I not more than anyone else, but I mean, a lot of I've had friends leave Woodstock. I've had family leave Woodstock. It's a real situation, and one of the concerns that I have that I just want to I'd like to, you know, foster a conversation around, like when you talk about not just renting but owning, you know, people owning property. One thing that I really want to try to avoid is land dynasties, you know, making sure that we can promote economic growth and upward mobility, and even come up with creative ways to create permanent wealth for people who might not be able to make it for themselves in an atmosphere like this, where, to be honest, you know, we've survived. I mean, as long as, for a lot of the time I've lived here, we've had this sort of restaurant boom, which has been great for, you know, restaurant owners and the sort of overall hospitality industry. But we also have to consider, you know, what it's going to look like going forward, and how can we, I guess, you know, if we're looking at, say, I'm looking at your document now, looking at commercial infrastructure with apartments overhead, you know, what is that going to look like? Where is it going to go? And also, just my last sort of specific thing, I'm very happy to see in page 2, is it? I just saw it in italics. Page 3, multifamily housing and what policies that would affect manufactured housing, tiny houses, and clustered houses. Those, I think, specifically clustered housing, tiny houses, are a very, very exciting solution to this issue that could check a lot of the boxes that I just mentioned, including the promotion of permanent wealth, the ability for the town to, or this land trust to not manipulate, for lack of a better word, but to change the zoning law as it pertains to that area, so that, as I understand it right now, you need to be able to, in the case of mobile tiny homes, you need a cement slab to pull them onto. They can't just be on, say, your gravel driveway. But the idea to me that younger people, people who volunteer, now what we consider to be essential services, could come here, rent to own a tiny home through a project, through a project like this, and not only, you know, grow and develop their wealth and and become part of this community, but then, you know, should they find themselves in a position where they are able to, say, buy their lease out or refinance it, they could pull that tiny home right off of the land. A lot of these are, I'm referring to mobile tiny homes, and perhaps there are avenues where we could allow homeowners to create space on their property to situate them either, you know, semi or more permanently. I think there's a lot of potential here, and I am very interested in getting into the weeds on the creative ways we can do it.
Great. Look forward to it.
Yeah. And for whatever it's worth, Kirk, I am working from home now. I would love to come to the next housing Zoom, I assume.
What are you doing Wednesday evening at 5?
Wednesday evening at 5, this Wednesday?
Yes.
That well, I'm working, but I can be there at 6.
Well, but we'll be almost
done?
done at that point.
We can put you on our list, and you'll, you know, our meetings are.
Whenever you want. Yeah, we'll add you to the list.
Yeah, I think what I'll have to do then is I'll come up. I'll talk to the people at work, find a date, find a what is it for you? Is it every other?
We have been meeting. Yeah, thanks for the question. We've been meeting only once a month now since the pandemic. We slowed it down because we were doing also so much work in between. We had other meetings in between. So we cut it to once a month in January, and that's the 4th Wednesday of the month. Okay.
4th
When
Wednesday.
we go back, we did originally, and we did for almost a year, meet twice a month, and that was the 2nd and the 4th Wednesday.
Okay.
And those are our official days, if you will, of twice a month, and those will be always what we'll hold to, because that spot on the 2nd Wednesday is still ours.
Well,
You do 5 o'clock?
Pardon?
5 o'clock?
Always,
Are you-
always at 5 to 5:30. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, 5 to 5:30. So you try to get
No,
over in
no,
half
excuse
an
me,
hour.
5 to 6:30. 5 to 6:30.
Boy, you guys are efficient.
Yeah,
We
we're
talk
really
fast.
no, yeah, 5 to 6:30. Excuse me.
Understood. I guess for me, what it's going to depend on then is, sounds like I should count on 4th Wednesdays happening, and you guys are going to roll out 2nd again when you can,
Yeah.
or periodically. So I will look for a 4th Wednesday in as soon as I can, where I will be able to switch shifts with someone and plan to attend.
We look forward to it.
So I guess my vision, though, is that we'll set up some work sessions because, and just like Jeff said earlier, you know, I think the natural subgroup, since Connor and I are both is assigned to housing, the natural subgroup is that will be part of the work session. And I certainly welcome anybody else on the zoning revision committee who wants to be diving into housing. And then Kirk, I don't know whether your whole committee or how many people will want to be part of that, but I guess I'm hoping that we can set up some meetings that are kind of deep dive into zoning, because just like I had shared in the action thing where I showed, here are the zoning law, here are the chapters and verses where we saw stuff. But I think it may be good, and I think Urena had done this, because when I was at your housing meeting before, Urena had been articulating the different parts of the zoning law she had found that she thought related. So I think that if we could have a subgroup that picks a time that works for all of us who want to be part of the subgroup, and we start out by saying, what are all the parts of the zoning law that we think are affected, and then start laying out what are some changes. But I think step 1 is who wants to be part of that subgroup, and step 2 is, but because like Connor can, you know, 5 o'clock, he's got to shuffle his schedule. You know, I've got a bunch of meetings on my calendar throughout the month. I would love to find the time.
We'll work out a time, the subgroup, we will create a subgroup. Not to cut you short, but we will definitely create a subgroup.
Well, we do have a zoning. We have a zoning subgroup.
It has a passion around this, so Urena will certainly be one of them. I don't want to speak on behalf of her, but I can know. I know that she's probably, you know, already got the list and she's on top of it, right?
Urena's here, so she can speak for herself if she wants to unmute.
Yeah, well, you know, but anyway, the point is that there will be times to talk about this in the future, and I think that that's something that we we should plan on. And like I said, we're meeting this Wednesday. One of the issues we'll be talking about this conversation, and then we'll be planning the rest of our year just because of the
Mhm.
looking ahead and how we can manage the COVID-19 scenario for ourselves. And Susan, you had something to
Right.
say?
Yeah, I just one overriding differentiation, because having worked on other housing committees in the past in Woodstock, you can create a change that allows something, for example, different ADUs, different use of apartments over commercial, whatever. What our particular focus is in ensuring that a good portion of that inventory is done in such a way that it is committed as Woodstock community housing, that it is below market, whether it is first-time home buyers or for rental, because what you've seen now is great. People build ADUs and they short-term rental them, and they make money, which is not necessarily bad. It's allowing some people to stay in their homes. But if we're going to create more affordable rentals and first-time home buyer options, there has to be something that you can hang your hat on in the zoning law that enables you to do that. And then if you're going to build something that is above market rate or market rate, you don't get those same considerations. You don't get those same flexibility. You don't get that
Yeah.
same incentives in terms of the process. So I
Susan,
really
if-
wanted to just make sure that that distinction gets made.
Susan, have you thought about things that would do that? Because I don't know how a zoning law, if you guys seem to have thought about more than we have, maybe, how would you do that with a zoning law? Because it's more an economic issue
Right.
than a zoning issue, right? And that's
Well-
the
Well,
problem.
I think
that we're gonna
I
face
think
here.
our purview is going to fall more to the density issue
Yes.
rather
Right, I
than
think
how
so.
you are going to word the
Thank you.
language. You can't zone apartments. Oh, only in this district you have to be $600 or less. It's not going to work like that.
That's not it.
Well, there is one of the things that we have been fleshing out, and I know Deborah's done quite a bit of research on what's happened in other towns and how they're using it, is the floating zone. And this Woodstock Community Housing floating zone would be tied, as I understand it, Deborah, pipe up if you can, would be tied to a predetermined, perhaps through a seeker process, a predetermined subset of criteria. You meet this, you plunk your project in this box and you check all these boxes, then you get the incentives.
Yeah.
So the
what
floating
is,
zone,
oh,
the
sorry, go
floating
ahead.
zone is what determines the financial aspect of this, as well as the trust. And I know I noticed that Ed is looking at housing authority models, and we hope you will consider looking at the trust model as the alternative to that. So then it's not a town thing. It's a,
I'm not sure the trust model is a zoning thing, though. Maybe I'm ignorant
No,
on
the
that. I
trust
thought that
well, I
was more
just
of a,
noticed that Ed was looking at housing authorities, so I thought I would just.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
The Woodstock Community Housing Trust is a marvelous and wonderful idea. I was thrilled when I first heard Susan Goldman mention it to the town board, and it thrilled my heart. But the question is, do you create a Woodstock Housing Trust floating zone, and is the Woodstock Housing Trust part of the zoning law, or is it a separate entity? I mean,
Separate
those
entity.
questions need to be answered. And I think we need to look at the schedule of use list, in this supplementary regulation, and figure out where to promote senior facilities, affordable housing. I like this idea of a cottage, a group of cottages as a development or a unit.
They're clustered homes, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a marvelous and wonderful idea. All these things are great, but as someone who helped write the 1989 zoning law, I know that it comes down to language. So I've been working with David Menzies on specific language to add to the telecommunications section of the zoning law, which takes up 22 pages.
Yeah.
So we are working on what Connor wants, which is to allow high-speed telecommunications while discouraging things like 5G. So that's not easy to do, but we are working on it. And the same thing is for the PRD. You suggest we change the PRD. I remember very well putting together the PRD regulations in the 1989 zoning law.
Mhm.
It, you know, we can think of language. It's all language. And that's what our group has to do, is come up with new language. And this idea that we have to pay some technician $250 an hour to rewrite the zoning law is not adequate. We can write the changes. We're all intelligent. And I know from helping write the 89 zoning law that any intelligent person can look at this language, and in the name of affordable housing and in the name of senior facilities and water protection, we can think of good language. And that's what I'm here to help do.
Great.
Yay.
Yeah.
Now, I'd personally definitely like to hear more about, you know, the vision for the land trust when we come to that. Maybe at another time. I know it's getting to the witching hour, but you know, when I think about how it might relate to zoning, just off the cuff, you know, we want to create the foundation for a more permissive trust for things to happen in there that we don't want to encourage elsewhere. And that, I believe, was first put forward by Jeff. The whole idea was to create, you know, to prevent things from being too clustered, which is sort of another issue that I'm working on in the scenic overlay right now, where we have all types of tree cutting and houses going up. You know, I think it's a lot of what we have to, you know, work around is going to be things like just making sure that we don't forego common sense safety, things like that, you know, making sure that the town still has, you know, the purview to say, like, yeah, you know, there's a large swath of, you know, maybe things we can loosen up, but, you know, but under these conditions. So I think it's great. And if I could ask Kirk, one thing I would love to see is if you have any sort of reference document similar to the one that that Laura has put together, something with, you know, a table of some sort of terminology schedule, or, you know, some assessment of some of these ideas you're bringing forward, anything like that, I would definitely love to see.
Well, we certainly don't have a document as
Comprehensive.
organized as Laura's. I can attest to that. But we do have a number of different, we have a lot of documents. We've generated a lot. So what we can do is then, our big part, just so to respond to that, and if you'll allow me to, a big part of our initial thrust was to gather information from the community, and that got hugely interrupted. Right? We started with the focus groups in November. We were well on our way of planning for a community meeting in May. And then along the way, we would, you know, bring people together and develop this ability for a tremendous amount of input from our community, right? And with that input, we would then be able to gain a perspective that none of us here could ever gain without that, right? So that input is what we were seeking first, and that got interrupted. So we have to, as a committee, look at how best we can achieve that gathering going forward. What we've then done since then is kind of gone internal with the pandemic and focused on the zoning, which is what brought us here today, and other issues that we're faced with assembling information around. And so we have a body of work that we'll give to you right after this meeting. And, we have a mission, the mission that the mission document is, there's a document we'll share with you. We'll include that because what you saw tonight in our presentation was just an abridged portion of it. So we have a body of work. One does include that document that was mentioned earlier by Urena. So that document is coming also. So, and then what we were hoping is that you would then look amongst yourselves review them. And then from there, we could allow the subgroups to engage with one another based on interactions from there.
Well, so let me just ask, so I think the next step is we'll define the subgroup. I believe Connor and myself are on it from the zoning revision committee. Does anybody else on the zoning revision committee want to be part of the subgroup working on housing?
I think it interacts with some pieces that I was working on, which is the PRD. I think that's a very important part of how that works.
We'd
We
love to
need
have you.
large spaces of land to be able to do what you guys want to do. We can't,
Okay,
so
we'd love to have
that's
you.
part of it.
Part of it. So from this committee, Connor, Jeff, and myself are volunteering to be part of the subgroup. And Kirk, maybe at your Wednesday meeting, if you don't already know who's in your subgroup, maybe on your Wednesday meeting you could define it. And then when we know who's in the subgroup, we'll get, we'll figure out how to get the subgroup going with its first meeting.
Well,
We certainly will do that. Susan?
we have, the zoning subgroup in our committee at the moment. We sort of pulled all hands on deck to come together for this meeting. But normally it is myself and Urena Kinlan and Deborah Meyer-Dewan. And then, recently, Kirk stepped in, Bob Young stepped in for some things. But the three of us have done most of the earlier research, and everybody's got their particular areas that they've looked into and are more familiar with. So depending on who and what you're looking at, you might have two of us, three of us, one of us,
Right. Well, for us to get going, I think what I'm looking at right now is let's get going, because this is a wonderful introduction. And the next step is get the subgroup kicked off, have a first meeting, get
Right.
going on maybe a cadence of meetings, and then start trying to crawl through and figure out what sections of the zoning law do we think we should be focused on. And then based on all your findings so far and all your ideas, and I really appreciate one thing that they made the comprehensive plan so great, I thought, was exactly that, is go out to the community and get their input. And I clearly understand the obstacle, the hurdle with coronavirus, that you can't just go out there and have your community meeting and open the doors at community center and say, come on in. So it'll be interesting. But my sense is, from everything that you shared in this meeting, that you shared a lot of wonderful ideas that I think that they're good to get going with. And someday we're not going to have a coronavirus, what's the right word? Suffocation, I guess I'll call it, right? We have we're not mobile, we're paralyzed, right? So at some point, so I think we can do a lot of homework now. And then when we can start having community meetings, I think we can have some fleshed out ideas to really share. So I feel like we have a lot of great stuff to work with based on the work you've already done. And clearly it needs to be collaborated. So, we can't just take a piece of what you give and go off in a vacuum and give you great words. It'll clearly be done, and it'll have iterations. So,
Well, this is great news to Susan and I.
Yeah.
Right? We're really pleased to hear this. I think that what we anticipated to accomplish and hope to accomplish this evening has been accomplished in terms of our two committees being introduced to one another, and us both understanding the amount of commitment and passion we feel about this subject for our town. And so let's keep working at it.
Yeah,
And
great.
thank you for having Susan and I
Yeah,
tonight.
thank you.
It's
Oh,
been
absolutely.
great to be here with everyone and to see who is on the zoning revision committee, and we look forward to working with you.
yeah,
And
well,
I think that there
right back
sorry.
at you.
I think
Great.
that there is, I won't say urgency, but I think maybe that's the right word, urgency in doing this, because, the market in Woodstock is exploding. There are articles in the New York Times about the market in Woodstock exploding. There are pictures of houses in Bearsville in the New York Times about how housing is exploding. And if we don't get something relatively quickly, we may lose any opportunity that we've had. We're already behind the 8 ball here in Woodstock.
Yeah, we are behind the 8 ball. I think that, thank you for bringing that urgency to the table tonight and letting us know that you feel the same way, because we feel that too. So we're leaning into this. And now that we've initiated this conversation with you all, it's like a relief, a pressure valve, if you will, for us, relieving because now we have a collaborative group of people that we can work with. So we'll be sure
Instead
to
of
move
just
this
3 of
forward.
us working on housing and zoning, now there's all of you too.
There's 6.
So
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
6.
yeah,
feels,
yeah.
feels like I have more hands on deck, which is great.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So it sounds like I can proceed in contacting the 6 we mentioned, Connor, Jeff, and me from zoning revision, your Raina, Susan, and Deborah from housing, to look for a time people can make a first meeting. Or do you want to still talk about it Wednesday at your meeting and see if more people want to be in that first meeting?
Well,
there might be some changes. Yeah.
yeah, we may,
Okay.
other people may want to join in, but why don't we proceed?
Go through
you
the
know, with
committee.
the
We'll
3
see
of
what
us?
happens.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so I'll wait till Wednesday, and then we'll have our list, and then we'll look to
Yeah. Sweet.
do our first meeting.
Great.
And I guess the other thing that I will say, well, I think since the purpose of this exercise is zoning, probably somebody from the 3 of us from zoning ought to be the lead, because the end result here is zoning. Even though it's a collaboration, we can't do it without you, unless somebody from housing wants to be the lead of this subcommittee. But my thought is, since the end result is the zoning change, it might make sense that somebody of the 3 of
You
us.
guys are the lead on it, since we're here to support you in the zoning changes, so that then turn around and support us. So, but you guys are ultimately writing the language that was articulated earlier, that it's the language that matters. So
Yeah, right.
if you can get a sense from us of what we're seeking to accomplish, and then you can agree to that, then it'd be up
Sure.
to you guys to wordsmith it.
Right, okay.
So you guys are the lead in that regard, and we'll just do everything we can to help you succeed.
Absolutely. Well, will help us, all of us succeed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we got our values. We're going to be making sure you help us succeed too.
It's like the old, remember the old Vidal Sassoon commercials? If you don't look good, we don't look good. So we all need to look good.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay.
Great.
So
Thank
very cool. So I'll wait till Wednesday for final list.
We'll be in touch with you.
Great. And then
Yeah, okay.
Kirk's going to leave you with some documents for everyone. So
So Kirk, if you send them to me, because then I mean, you can send them to the whole committee if you want, but I tend to send everything to the committee, because then I have a record of when I sent it out. So I know when everybody has it, and that goes in my records. So either send it to me or the whole committee, either way. But anyway, I'll look for what
Well,
you
when
send
it comes
out.
to this exchange, we'll make sure that it goes through you. But in the future, people can set their own terms of exchange.
Oh, sure.
In
Sure.
terms of the subgroups and all that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Great.
So I would ask the zoning revision committee stay on, because we still have a little housekeeping to do.
Yeah,
And,
we're going to skedaddle and let you guys get to your
we have
business.
plenty of housekeeping. I don't need any more housekeeping.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
All
Now,
right.
I'm not showing you my house here with my camera, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Nice
this
to see
evening.
you
My
all.
pleasure.
Take
Wonderful
care.
meeting.
Here, Raina.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
All right, man.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
So I'll go ahead and share my screen again, because I just want to come up and pull up the, oops. Yeah, you have to do it twice here. I have to say I want to share it, and then I have to say I want to share it again. Okay. So the other things I wanted to talk before we skedaddle, because I know we've been over our hour. So I did want to, well, first of all, do I have anybody to approve the minutes? I sent the minutes out at the same time that I sent out the other stuff. And anybody willing to, well, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. Anybody want to second minutes?
Bear with me one moment.
Okay. Send them out.
Yes, second.
Perfect. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Well, I heard 2
Aye.
people. Aye. We
Me
said
too.
three. Yay, yay. So agree. Okay. Agree. Okay. So we did that. Now, the next thing is, so Steve Romine, there have been all kinds of emails flying around, and then sorry for sending, I think I sent more than one out, and I didn't have, you know, when you do a reply, it drops off your attachments, and it's like, oh dear, I needed the attachments anyway. So I did send off, there's a proposed presentation with this lawyer, Andrew Campanelli. I think I maybe spelled that wrong, but anyway, and I did tell Steve that I would go to that. And I think Connor indicated that he would go to that if he could. So hopefully Steve is going to give us some ideas. And what the thing is, he says, here's a lawyer, this is the claim, is there's a lawyer who's been working across the country and has a lot of experience and success in helping towns put up ordinances that halt 5G. And so he wants to have this lawyer come talk to people in Woodstock. And I did say that, give me a choice of dates and I'll let him know when I can attend. And I think Connor said he would attend also if he can.
Yes.
I didn't know if anybody else wanted to. I know, Ed, I saw your response email that said you and Dave, and of course there was the presentation, the 40-page document of what he presents that was attached to it, which everybody got a copy of that too. So I didn't know if anybody besides Connor and I want to go to that. And I think as far as the town board, Bill McKenna pretty well said, oh, Laura, thanks for volunteering. I thought we should have one person from the board go, and thank you for volunteering. So I'm not expecting to have other people, although I'm going to ask Reggie, honestly, because Reggie certainly has been against 5G and was the liaison to the telecommunications committee. So I may just ask Reggie, if we have more than 2 of us from the town board, it becomes a quorum and we have to make it a formal meeting. But anyway, does anybody else on this committee?
I just have a question about this lawyer.
Yeah.
What
a lot
about
of
his
questions.
track record? Does he have a list of what he's achieved in the 5G area?
Okay, good question.
He's from
Where-
Mineola. You can find references to his work on the internet. And Romine is a decent guy, but he's attaching money to this guy's performance for the town. He's saying it's costing $8,000 and he's got a volunteer that's willing to pay this $8,000 for this guy to lecture the town on its telecommunications law. And I like Steve Romine, but he's being a little aggressive and a little pushy. He wants to hog in on what our committee has the legal obligation to do, is to
Right.
Yeah.
write we have 22 pages of telecommunications law in our zoning law. So we want to figure out
Bear with me. Sorry.
how to add stuff to this that Dave and I are working on, and we have a lot of help. And I don't think at this point that we need this gentleman from Mineola, but I think you should probably let somebody pay $8,000 to have him give us a talk. I mean, that's,
Well, the town's not going to pay the $8,000. Steve says he's got to volunteer. And my thought is, why not listen to what he says?
no,
So
I
that's
think
kind of,
that's a good idea. That's a wonderful idea.
That's
But
my take on it too. But the thing I wanted to interject with, because I got to go eat something pretty soon, is that I spoke to Steve at some length yesterday. Now, he was taking it kind of personally that we weren't immediately responding to the messages he was sending, and I told him not to, because obviously we're all busy and distracted with our shared set of circumstances, and most of us are volunteers, so I know I have a lot of other things going on. But I did talk to him for almost an hour on the phone, and I made very clear up front, my prerogative is not to necessarily prevent 5G just because I am not in the camp. I'll just be perfectly honest. I work with engineers at Marker Tech, and we are a communications company, and no one who I talk to in R&D is scared of this stuff and thinks it's going to melt your brain. So I don't get my information from YouTube. If I want to talk to someone about the science of it, I'm going to talk to an engineer, and if I want to hear about the legal stuff, I'm going to talk to a lawyer. That being said, I do want to go hear this. There is a second person that he has suggested that we have come speak to us, and I do think this has more to do with our purview. I am looking into it right now, but his name is, I believe, Bruce, and he does, his thing is talking about where the money for 5G came from. And without going into the minutia of it, he is of the mind that at one point there was a surcharge being levied against people by all telecom companies that was being collected, put into a pool to implement fiber optic cable. That sort of stopped, and it seems to have become part of 5G. Now, again, my prerogative is not to avoid 5G, but I am very much in support of the merits of fiber. And I believe that if this guy Bruce, who I just cannot find his thing right now, but if this guy can come and talk and give us real answers about how we can specifically craft language that would say essentially the town is not going to allow those funds to be allocated before we allow them for their original purpose, which was for 5G, which was for fiber optic cable, then not only will we, kind of help satiate some of the concerns of the people who are against it, but we might actually find an avenue to help fund the implementation of a fiber optic network. So that's what I would like to see happen after this lawyer meeting, is maybe bring that person to the board.
Yeah. Well, so say again, so does anybody so Connor and I plan to go listen to what this lawyer plans to say at no cost to us. Does anybody else, David or Ed or Jeff,
Are you going to Zoom that meeting, or is it going to be recorded?
Oh, that's a good question. Will it be recorded? That's a really good question. I don't know. That would be smart, though. And I know what Steve has said is that we're going to get an updated, that 40-page document. We'll get an updated version of it because it's a little outdated, so he says. So we'll get a new copy of the documentation that I have heard. It's a good question whether the meeting will be recorded.
Yeah, I don't have time to go. I'm up finishing a book. I'm right in the middle of I'm almost finished with the book, and I really can't take time out to do
Right.
what I think is probably a frivolous exercise.
Yeah, okay, no problem. So David, did you want me to include you, or would you rather just listen to the recording later?
When is it? Well, yeah, I'd rather listen to the recording, actually.
Okay, well, so we don't know when it is. It's just that I had asked Steve to give me a choice of days and times, and then I would let him know when I'm available. So that's kind of how he and I left it. So it sounds like it's Connor and me at the meeting with Steve. So
Well, good.
Okay. So what's coming up? We have. Let me just go through the future meeting plans, and that's the last thing I had wanted to do as far as the agenda. So we do have, and thank you, Ed, for reaching out to Ken Panza to come talk to us as subject matter expert on natural resources. I sent everybody, there was a great presentation, Ingrid, her last name's escaping me, but a great presentation to the town board of the natural resource inventory. Wonderful file. Clearly there are a lot of maps, and I know Ken was very active as that was being built. So I'm not sure if I have whether he will have additional documentation to send us, but for now you have the NRI presentation that was given to the town board on Tuesday last week, and Ken was there, and again he was very involved. Also in July, Connor is reaching out to David Lax to come to the second meeting in July, so that's the plan there.
I have reached out to him today, still waiting reply.
Yeah, okay, but thank you for doing that. And so in August, I know, Ed, you had thought you and David might have proposed telecommunications zoning changes in August. It's possible some groups are taking going from 2 meetings to 1 over the summer months. I didn't know if you wanted to do that or not in August. We could, but because for example, if we just skip the first meeting in August, then the second meeting, Ed and David may have their proposed wording for the telecommunications because they thought August. So that might be a thought, but it can be whatever you guys want. We can still meet twice. But if we did skip the first meeting and then met on the 4th Monday with the hope that we'd be looking at proposed telecommunications wording from Ed and David, that might be my thought. Or we can have 2 meetings in August as we have planned. And then in the future, sometime we'll just look at the Hamlet area zoning, because we said we want to do the natural resources, look into that first. So at some point we'll go into Hamlet and then other stuff.
The
So that-
telecommunications language is very complicated. And
okay.
you know, it is a lot of material. I have like 100 pages on my computer about this.
Right.
And David and I have to distill this down to language that
Mhm.
is not illegal. There's this federal law that prevents towns from doing a lot of things regarding telecommunications. So we can't buck
Right.
horns with the federal government too much.
Sure.
But there is a new avenue for preventing these antennae associated with 5G from sprouting up on buildings all over town.
Mhm.
And we'll figure out a way to write that in, but we may or may not come up with something the second meeting in August.
Fine. Oh,
We
okay.
can
So
present
no,
what we
no
can present
promise.
what we have.
No promise date because it's complex. Gotcha. Okay. I get it. Plus you're finishing a book, as you said. So that's fine. So anyway, so August, it's August maybe, right? So it's August maybe. So I'll make sure that's a maybe. So, okay. So we'll figure out August as we get a little closer to it. So, okay. But I think this was a great meeting, and it sounds like we're going to have some additional, so we have 2 meetings already a month for zoning, but it sounds like we'll have, besides that, another meeting here and there for this deep dive into housing. So I think we're good. So, okay. Do I have anybody who wants to make a motion to adjourn? Any other topics?
moved.
Oh, so moved. Connor, he's going to go get some dinner.
Needs some
Second.
food.
I'll second it. Oh, I sure did second it. Okay. All in favor?
Right.
Aye. Perfect.
Yeah.
So,
You have a great one, you guys.
And
See you,
thank you
Connor.
all for joining. Excellent meeting.
Have a good one.
Okay,
you.
bye-bye.
You.
And thank you, Ashley, for hosting us.
You're very welcome.
So I think we're good to go. Thanks.